Welcome. You've clicked yourself onto Three Guys and an iPad, the only mortgage-focused podcast willing to let you insert your own punchline here. That's probably funnier than anything I've got anyways. And I'm Brian Rieger from Content Beacon, joined as always by my friend and partner at Content Beacon, Rick Grant. Rick, hello. Been a long time.
It has been, Brian. It's good to see you. I'm really
I'm-
glad we're getting this show going again.
Absolutely. And of course, we wouldn't be the Three Guys without our dear friend from Austin, Texas, Mr. Kevin Breeland of Wells Fargo. Mr. Breeland, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Brian. I'm doing great, Rick. How are y'all today?
Great to have the band back together. And, we're going to have some fun here today. And, we'll kind of get caught up. It's been a couple of years since our last episode. We've all been first real busy and then real busy trying to stay busy. But, it's a different time now. We're all going to get through it together, and that'll be sooner than later. Before we get into the heart of the show, I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't make a shameless plug for Content Beacon, the premier B2B content marketing agency in the industry. So if you're trying to reach someone in the business segment, wholesaler to broker, title companies, etc., give us a call if you'd like to do your own podcast, get some white papers. We'd be happy to tell you what we can do. With that, Mr. Grant, let it roll. All right. Good to see we've got the old music back. And of course, we've also got another old friend joining us today, possibly the fourth guy of the Three Guys. We've got Mr. Chuck Cain, Senior Vice President at F&F Family of Companies. Mr. Cain, how are you, sir?
Living the dream, just living the dream.
Well, it's great to see you. All right. So it's been a while. So for the friends and family who are watching for the first time in a while, and for everyone else watching us for the first time, we thought we'd throw a quick video together to show you kind of what we're all about. Rick, why don't we share that with you? And here we go. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Three Guys and an iPad, what we hope will be the mortgage industry's podcast version of your office water cooler.
I barely made it to this podcast because we were reorganizing the stuff that's been in the cabinets in the bathroom.
Marks, how are you today?
Hold on 1 second. Is the check clear yet for these guys? Old man thought. That's an old man's thought process right there.
This comes to us from Ryan Smith at MPA Magazine. Our piece today is actually an opinion piece over at National Mortgage News.
Mr. Peanut mascot has died.
And that's Three Guys in a nutshell. So what are we going to do? Well, we're going to do a little more of the same and just try to get better at it. What's ahead? Well, we'll talk about industry news and trends with some of our friends and experts. A lot of folks on here, folks would pay money to go see at a real conference and actually do quite frequently. We'll do some lighthearted stuff and some stuff that isn't lighthearted. And if you think you know of a good guest for us, or you'd like to be one, or you have a topic you'd like to see us discuss, just get in touch with us. Of course, if you're watching this on YouTube and you'd like to give us a thumbs up, well, that wouldn't hurt either. So on that note, we're going to get into something a lot more serious. Former guest of the show, the mortgage industry really lost one of its greatest thought leaders, advocates, and all-around human beings very recently. And that, of course, is Dave Stevens. Didn't know David really well. He was a guest on our show, but I could tell you he was thought-provoking. He was brilliant. He was outspoken in his passion for the industry. And above all, he was accessible. He was humble. And he helped me in the last couple of years to learn what the hell the Fed really does. But, as I said, I didn't know him that well. I'd like to let either Chuck or Kevin jump in and just say a couple of words for the truly great person we've lost.
Well, see, I'll go ahead and jump in. Yeah, I mean, I got to know David when he was at Long & Foster, and he was very much involved at Respro, where he was the president of Respro one year. And I remember Sue Johnson, who was the executive director at Respro. Dave had presented before a congressional committee on behalf of the real estate industry. She had asked him to do it while he was functioning as Respro president. And Sue related that after he was did his presentation rather in front of the committee, that when he stepped out, he said, I could do this all the time. And he did become involved, obviously. I mean, he was back at the GSEs back in the 1990s. But, Dave is one of the few people who definitely had one solid foot in the private sector and one solid foot in the public sector. So he knew how it all worked, and he knew that none of it worked unless it all worked together. And I think one of the things about Dave that many people will never know, even people who may have met Dave in his tenure at the MBA or as federal housing commissioner, is that Dave Stevens did a tremendous amount of work, again, on both the public and private sector to restore the housing industry and the wealth of real estate in this country after the Great Recession, if that is the term, of 2008 and 2009, both as federal housing commissioner and then at MBA. So this country really owes a debt of gratitude to just a really wonderful man, and he will be missed.
Yep. I concur all of that with you, Chuck. Like you, I met Dave through Respro as well. And while I knew Dave while he was at Long and Foster and the various meetings that we had there, where I had the opportunity to really get to know the man was at a Respro conference in Las Vegas when Dave was FHA commissioner. He spoke at the conference and then agreed to have dinner with Sue Johnson and myself and a few other board members with Respro. And it turned out that Dave and I sat next to each other. And so through the course of the evening, Dave had that remarkable ability to make you feel like you've known him his whole life. He was a great listener. He was a passionate leader. He believed in the industry. He believed in what the industry could do for everyday Americans. And during the course of that evening, Dave and I came to find out that we were both the same age. Our birthday was 7 days apart. I was older than he was, so I felt the need from time to time to send him an email with wisdom and guidance. But that guidance typically was a picture of the Corvette that I bought or things of that nature. When Dave was diagnosed, came out with his diagnosis, I reached out to him privately, and because of the health issue I had in 2013, and basically just shared a few things that I ran into through my recovery, and just to let him know that he could always reach out anytime. But of course, if Dave was anything, he was a very, very strong individual and very private, very, very private individual. And but he was a terrific person, terrific man, and sorely missed. I have thought about him many, many times since his passing, and wish I had that opportunity to send him one of those wisdom emails that I would send him from time to time. So I miss him. I considered him a friend and a dear friend, and he will, not only will all of us miss him individually, but he will certainly be missed in the industry by far.
I'd agree, Kevin. It's the mortgage industry is not the same today. We're missing a piece. We're missing an important piece. Our sincere condolences to David's closest friends and family. He will be missed. Absolutely. And with that, it's a little bit of a rough transition, but probably the way Dave would have wanted it. Let's talk mortgage headlines. And of course, This is a segment where usually we'll pluck a few headlines, some interesting headlines from the industry, from the various trade pubs. But it's been 2 years, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to. You don't need the links. Each one of these topics has about 1 million links at this point. So, of course, we'll start with this topic, and of course, it's the rates. Stupid, as a client of mine said, it's what this industry goes on. So I want to throw this out to my guests and my friends here. These aren't novel questions. They're being asked every day, and even the soothsayers aren't really doing that well with it. When does this change, and when does the mortgage market come back? Who wants that loaded question?
Well, I'd like to give kind of a different perspective on all of this, and then we can take it however direction you want to. But yeah, I've been doing this coming up on 45 years, and when I started in the business, if you look at that interest rate chart we had up there a minute ago, 45 years ago, interest rates were up around 19.5% for a 30-year fixed rate mortgage. And over the course of my career, as you can see from that chart, rates have come down. They came down a considerable amount from 19.5, I think, to the lowest rate I ever did on a loan was a 15-year loan at 2 3/8. I mean, it was just crazy. And one of the things that I remember through all of this time is that, like Black Monday in October of 1988, when interest rates went from 11 to 14% in a span of 8 hours, there weren't a lot of times where rates came down and then jumped back up a great deal. You might have that, 0.25% or 0.5% movement because of various things in the market. But typically, throughout my career, they were always on a steady decline. But what we experienced at the beginning of 2013 is that they made an abrupt turn. And by the time we got to the summer of 2023, by the time we got to the summer of 2023, we were looking at interest rates that were 8.5, 8 5/8 from a year earlier where they were in the 3s or 2s, depending on what you were looking at. And what we really saw from that was an entire industry almost come to a complete stop. And that for me was something that I had never experienced at the magnitude that created. So what I think going forward is that overjubilation is certainly not in the cards. I think we all have to be patient. As industry vets, we need to make sure that we're taking care of our customer base and our referral partners. And as consumers, if it's that time where we have to buy a new house or buy a new car or whatever it is, then we just have to go do it. And that's the reality of what we live in today. The fact of the matter is, having lived through that time period, when my wife and I could barely rub 2 nickels together and was trying to buy a house, and we managed to do it, we'll survive this as well, whether we survive it on an individual basis or a company basis. Yes, there'll be some contraction. There will always be contraction because, when people gear up for doing ridiculous amounts of volume through 2020, 2021, and early 2022, you cannot cut your business that fast to be able to survive the contraction that we saw in 2023. So yes, there are going to be continued there'll be continued mergers and people that will leave the industry. And I read somewhere where as much as 50% of the NMLS loan officers didn't renew their license for 2024. And okay, it just is what it is. I'm not sure that there's enough business for the 50% that are left. But, you just go on and you just do what you have to do. But, what the Fed's going to do, I don't think they even know. I think their idea is we're probably looking at something in June. And there's been talks that it's going to be cut all the way down to 4.25 by the end of 2024. I'm not that optimistic. I honestly don't think that if we see 50, 75 basis point cut for the remainder of 2023, we should all be high-fiving ourselves out in the hallway and looking at our new red Corvettes that we need to go get because we're going to start making money again. But at the end of the day, I don't want to be pessimistic about it. I just want to be realistic. I would be greatly surprised if it was more than that come the end of 2024.
Well, thanks, Kevin. And I want to get Chuck Cain involved here. Chuck, what are we talking here? Survive until 25, a phrase that makes my skin crawl at this point, or something else? What do you think?
Well, as Niels Bohr said, predictions are difficult, especially when they involve the future. And so, as we move forward here into this year, and as we're here talking today, I just was watching the ICE mortgage monitor as to where we are, and the issues we face. We talk about the Fed rates and what those may do and what the Fed may or may not do. And I agree with Kevin. Is there going to be a cut in March? Well, 30 days ago, we thought there definitely would be. And now, well, not so much. May or June, more likely before we see a cut because the economy is cranking along. And unemployment is literally an all-time low. And we face, a few other little things. We've got arguably, two leading candidates of our political parties have between the two of them 160 years of experience. That is something that's of concern to a lot of people as to, where does the economy go if Biden is reelected or if Trump is elected. Obviously, two very divergent paths as far as governmental involvement and, how effective are they or what drag do they create? But and we talked about Dave Stevens earlier, and I had Dave Stevens on the F&F Unplugged podcast last April. And Dave talked about rates and talked about various things, but what he came back to was listings. Nothing's for sale. And we continue to see that listings in hot markets are slow. Now, some markets are starting to come back. California, interestingly, starting to come back with listings. Texas, likewise, but Texas had such great boom years. It took a while for that to cool down. But we just don't have houses for sale. And a guy who used to be an analyst in our industry back in the 1990s, who I got to know, a guy named Larry Baer from Kevin's home there in Texas, used to say that the housing market is driven by one thing, demand. So interest rates will determine how big a house you're going to buy. But the fact of the matter is, if you want to buy a house, you're going to try to buy a house. Yeah. We have seen first-time home buyer activity increase dramatically from where it was during the COVID years. So people want to buy homes, and they're out trying to find them. There just aren't a lot of houses to buy. And, in the marketplace, we've started to see a transition. It's the old 60-40, 60% of the mortgage transactions are purchases, 40% are refinances. That's a number that may not necessarily hold water as sort of a customary market anymore. But we began to see a transition in refinances. We're at 75-25, with 25% of the transactions being refinances. People taking cash out, and one of the reasons for that, and again, they're refinancing quite often loans that are in the 3s and 4s, refinancing into loans that are in the 6s and 7s, but they're doing it cash out because we have the largest dollar amount of credit card debt in our history. And the Fed rate hits that credit card debt right between the eyes. So when the Fed rate is high, credit card debt rates, interest rates on credit cards go sky high. As we know in the industry, mortgage bonds are what drive interest rates. And sometimes it can be inverse to what the Fed does. Fed drives up rates. The bond market feels good about that because they feel the Fed's going to cut inflation. And so our bonds drop for a little while. So it runs, sometimes counter to the market with the Fed. But interest rates on credit cards and the Fed rate They are joined at the hip. And so we do see that activity. 2024, all the analysts, all the pundits see what I would say to be a C+ to B- year. That there'll be activity, there'll be business, probably more in the second half of the year than in the first half of the year. But one of the major problems we have is that there's not much for sale in many, many key markets. The home builders can't build fast enough. We have for 15 years not put enough houses back in to replace those that have gone into obsolescence. And a whole nother topic, which we could probably spend an hour talking about, is the fact that property and casualty insurance, homeowners insurance rates in many places have skyrocketed. And that's another affordability issue. In Louisiana, where the average price of homeowners insurance has quintupled in 2 years, that's another problem. But it's got nothing to do with any federal regulator. It has to do with a marketplace, a reinsurance marketplace, and state regulation. That's not an easy problem to solve other than letting it shake out. But all those things enter into it. But it'll be, I think, a decent year for residential. Commercial, we'll see. There's still a logjam on money. But I think we'll see a decent year, and I think a better year in the second half.
All right. Well, Chuck, don't go anywhere. I want to come right back to you with another question elsewhere. But Mr. Grant, don't think you're going to be hiding in the production booth all year this year. Thoughts on the interest rates?
So nobody comes to me to tell them what the Fed is going to do. But I can tell you what the Fed's trying to do, at least from my perspective, and that's to control the economy, right? It used to be years ago, you could look at all these indicators and it would give you an idea of how any business would cycle. But man, I think those days are long behind us now. Now, the Fed crew is watching, and they know if interest rates fall more than half a percentage point, a ton of borrowers are going to rush back and refinance those loans, and it's going to kick the economy in a weird way. And I don't think they want that. I think when they start lowering rates, it's going to be a slow, long, painful process because they're trying desperately to maintain some control over an economy that in America, it can grow out of control anytime. Anytime.
Well, see, America, I told you, he's not just a pretty face. He knows what he's talking about. All right, guys, we're going to move on. Maybe the next biggest topic of at least the last 12 to 18 months, maybe a little less. You could say Burnett, you could say NAR. But Mr. Cain, I want to start with you. Are we looking at the end of the traditional real estate realtor model as we know it? Much ado about nothing. What do you think?
Probably all the above. What I have heard in talking to real estate brokers, one thing which has been a response from responsible real estate brokers and agents is to simply explain to the consumer what goes into the payment of a commission. And I think that's something, that's a conversation. Transparency is a big issue. And the DOJ and entities that have looked at the real estate industry, it's that transparency. And if you look at the Sitzer decision and the arguments there, the people didn't really know what goes into that 6%. And frankly, I think NAR did a hideous job of putting forward in their television advertisement and all their advertisement, really the value proposition of retaining a real estate agent. We know that from all the NAR statistics that people want to use real estate agents now more than ever. But, we used to see commercials all the time where, the extremely attractive female real estate agent was showing a house that looked to be in West Hollywood and walking through it and everyone's smiling and she's carrying a notepad and then, a beautifully diverse couple signs the documents and off we go. Instead of showing a real estate agent at midnight trying to hammer out and get documents over to people to meet deadlines in regard to inspections or loan qualifications or being in a basement that is ankle deep in muck, trying to figure out what they're going to do in regard to this listing. That value proposition was not well put forward. But I think we will see changes. We have seen changes. We see a dramatic change in the use of buyer agency agreements, more and more and more brokers requiring them, where They might not have required them in the past. It was already predicted, of course, a drop off, and Kevin was talking about loan officers, a drop off in the number of real estate agents in the United States. We're going to see probably a higher number because those real estate agents who sold 2 and 3 houses a year, I think that end of it is done. The good news is that means that the people who are going to be in the realty industry are going to be the real professionals. And we're not going to have as many people who are out there who, sold 2 houses a year to somebody they met at their tennis club. And I think that's going to be important. So I think when we come out of the end of the tunnel, I think that the real estate industry will probably be healthier. It will be a smaller real estate industry with more professionalism. I think consumers will understand more about what they're paying for. Will we see a drop in commission rates? Maybe a bit, but I don't think it's going to be as dramatic as certainly a lot of the consumer advocates would like to think. So, we'll see how it all plays out. But there's demand for people to use real estate agents, and they need their professionalism in what's a very difficult transaction. So no, I think that in regard to this litigation, the real party holding the bag is NAR, and we heard NAR discuss here just in the last week that in terms of their insurance, they're out in money for legal defense. This is going to be a real problem for NAR, and of course, on top of it, from what we heard is that the way things were working around the NAR headquarters, that it was more like the Playboy Mansion than a typical trade association. So they've had a lot of issues. They're going to have a lot of issues. I don't think the organization is going away. There may be competing organizations that do rise. I think we'll see some dramatic changes too about how MLSs work. We've seen a big increase in the Homes.com program that Andy Florence from CoStar put together, and how that is moving very, very quickly. It is now the second largest source of listings in the United States. So again, we're going to see changes. It's a dramatic change, and the lawsuit is a big pivot into it. And we'll see how these other lawsuits all play out here, and the dozens of them that are filed state by state against individual MLSs and real estate brokerages.
Well, thank you, Chuck. And just a programming note, Chuck, I know you have a hard out here in 13 minutes, so you just go ahead and drop when you need to. We do appreciate you being here. Hopefully we can have you stick around a little longer. But I do want to bring in Mr. Breeland to talk a little bit about Burnett and NAR. Kevin, what do you think?
Well, there's not really anything Chuck said that I disagree with. I would simply add these pieces to it. While I completely agree that we may see some changes in how the industry is done, I do agree 100% with Chuck that NAR has done a really poor job in conveying to the public the value of a realtor. I thought that when they were doing those consumer commercials for a while, they had the one commercial with the realtor and the couple when a tree had fallen on a house they were getting ready to close on right before closing. Those kinds of, I think though that is the message that that NAR has to get out to the general public. But let's also keep in mind that our public has changed a great deal from when my generation was coming into adulthood and being the driving force of the economy. Now our children and my grandchildren, they don't interact with people a great deal. They interact with their devices. They interact with their laptops, their phones, their iPads, and that's how they do things. And so the access to information is what they want more than anything. And I believe that because that access to information is slowly being taken away from the holders of it in the past, that they now see less value in a realtor, because what can a realtor do that I can't do for myself? And that's the message that NAR has to get across to today's public. they need to do a better job and outline all the different things that a realtor can do, not in when everything is positive and great, but when there's problems. Yes, it's great to be able to get on your laptop and start looking and all of that. But at some point in time, people end up talking with each other, whether it's on the phone, whether it's by Zoom, whether it's face to face, and it becomes a personal interaction. And that personal interaction during the course of that transaction is going to have bumps in the road, and they need to really highlight more about what those kind of bumps in the road are, and how the realtor helps them navigate through those issues, and especially with this generation behind us doing everything via the devices. They're living in different parts of the country, buying their next house virtually off of a Zoom video, sight unseen. That's how I would classify it, and that's how real estate is being done now. So I do think that all of us, title industry, the mortgage industry, the real estate industry, we all need to get much more adaptable to what this new buying public is doing, and adapt to it quickly, because they're making it change whether we want to change it or not.
Well, I remember a time not too long ago when Zillow was going to replace the realtor. That didn't quite work out, although certainly Zillow is doing okay for itself. Mr. Grant, thoughts?
Well, this is something that I've been working on for a while now. One of my day jobs is editorial director at Weekly Real Estate News, and we've been talking and writing a lot about this issue. And everything that's been said on the consumer side is great. The problem is that consumers don't understand lawsuits. All they understand is that they've been ripped off, and that's all they hear when that news lands, and that's going to be really bad for them. But the industry needs to realize this is not a one-front war. This is a two-front war, and if they ignore the other, they're going to be in really deep trouble, and that's the agent side. So NAR has already got other organizations coming in trying to get membership, but the other people that are going to suffer are the big real estate companies, because for years and years, the game was get your real estate license, connect yourself to a big real estate company with a powerful brand. And we all know all those brands because we see them a million times. Well, now those brands basically mean, if you're associated with them, that you've been ripping people off. I'm paraphrasing the lawsuits, of course, but you know as well as I do, Brian, in our business, perception is reality. And if consumers think that being part of any of the big real estate companies just puts them in league with a bunch of people who aren't doing them right, well, they're either going to get out of the business or not do that, which it's a fantastic opportunity for both real estate companies who now have to go back through the rebranding process, find out who they really are, what they really offer the consumers, which is going to force them to decide what consumers really want and need. And it's the same for agents too. They're going to have to realize that they have to take ownership of their own brand. They can't wait for some big company who could be in court tomorrow, for all they know, right, to do that. So it's going to be exciting for the people that stay, but it's going to be the hardest work they've done in generations.
Well, very good, Mr. Grant. I see Mr. Cain's hung with us this long. I'm going to ask, we'll touch on this topic just briefly, and then we'll come back to it again. We've got plenty of time in future episodes, but it is almost spring conference season. And when I think conferences, I think Chuck Cain. I don't know about you, but I do. Before you leave us here, Chuck, very quick, is anyone going to the conferences this year? And if so, who? What's it going to be like out there?
Yeah, I mean, the attendance at the conferences that I've been to, I mean, it's off from where they were, pre-COVID certainly, and maybe in a little bit of the bounce back of COVID, before the rates changed in the spring of 22. For mortgage banking conferences, there's still good attendance, but it's certainly not what it was. When we're talking about some of the other trade associations, yes, it's down from where it was. And I think, we'll still see the conferences go along, but we've seen MBA, consolidate a couple conferences just to be sure that they are hitting the appropriate people and to bring in, solid numbers. So there is still attendance. There's no question about that. but many companies who used to send 6 or 7 people are now sending 2. And part of that's just to cut back on dollars. T&E is expensive. It's true across the board. Anybody who's in the real estate industry, whether you are in realty or lending or title and settlement, everybody's looking on cutting back those discretionary dollars a bit because you have to. The dollars aren't quite there. The largesse is not just coming in. So the trade shows are holding their own. Talking to Ken Tripetta at Respro, the attendance is churning along at about where it's been for the last couple of years. So we're seeing people still come to the shows, but they're just being more mindful about how many people go and how many shows they go to.
Chuck, are you still going to as many shows as you used to? Because you used to hit just about every show in the industry.
Well, as I said, Rick, there aren't quite as many shows to go to because a lot of them have consolidated or even been canceled. We just saw, in the merger of the Housing Wire show with Steve Murray's show. And so I'm not going to as many shows because, again, there just aren't as many shows to attend. On the other hand, the advantage of that is, to my mind, when you're talking about any sort of trade show, there's 3 components. There's the content of the show, there's the networking at the show, and then there's the vendors. Those are the 3 reasons to go to a show because you can, in 1 or 2 days or 3 days, knock out seeing a whole bunch of your customers, seeing what the trends are, hearing what the trends are. So you need all 3 points of those. The vendors aren't coming back in the same numbers that they were before. And part of that may be that they've decided it's like, during COVID, we didn't show up, and for some reason, our business still managed to crank through. So I think, we're seeing some of that on the vending side. But that networking is still, hugely important. And that's why people go to the shows.
Well, Chuck, I appreciate that. We appreciate you being here today. We'll let you run. I know you've got some things to do and places to be. We'll have you back if you'll have us. Sound good?
Look forward to it. Always enjoy it.
Fantastic. Chuck Cain, Senior Vice President, F. Now, Rick, you had some thoughts on conference season as well. And then, Kevin, I'm going to come your way right after that.
Well, I do, and I've been nursing this heartache for a long time. Most people that know me, if they know me, they know that I love technology in the industry. And when the Mortgage Bankers Association killed their tech conference this year, that was a blow. That was a serious blow. And now we don't have a lot. We have a few tech shows, but the feedback I got from last fall was that most of them are kind of like meetups for vendors at this point. That may change when lenders and real estate companies see people offering stuff that they actually are in the market to buy, something that we're not seeing right now. Now, the difference is on the real estate side, if you go down to the broker level. So, or not the broker level, the real estate agent level. This is a show that I'm going to be speaking at coming up in April. Was that next month already? Just about. Yep. John Glenn Stevens is the publisher of Weekly Real Estate News. He's putting on our first of what we hope will be about 4 conferences across the country coming up in April. He's already got a very impressive list of speakers. I shouldn't have said that before I told you I'm one of the speakers, but other than me, they're very impressive, right?
It's fit.
Yeah. Other than me. And I think it's going to be a good show. He's got some people that are going to draw some agents. And I'm excited about it because I'm going to do a branding workshop where we can actually sit down and go through the branding exercise. And by branding, I don't mean the colors of your logo and the type style, all that stuff. That's important. That comes after this initial work. So I'm really looking forward to sitting down with agents and trying to figure out if they know what consumers think is their value, because that's the connection they have to make. If they don't get inside the brain space of the consumer, they're gonna have a hard time this year and next.
Well, I'll give you a quick plug there, Rick. Folks, if you are planning to go to that conference or you're on the fence, Rick doesn't get out to speak as much as he used to, but if you have seen him, you know you're in for a treat. So, Rick, I'm looking forward to that session and hearing more about it, and
Very kind.
get out there and knock them dead. Mr. Breeland, spring shows. Any thoughts on conference season?
Well, I just would like to piggyback off of what Rick just said, and I think that, and this is something both of you have heard me say more than once, the consumer is looking for that value-added package, and if you don't present them with a value add, then they don't think that there's any value for them to use your services. As far as the conferences go, I guess I'm the proverbial cow that's been put out to pasture. I don't go to them anymore, and I don't get invited to any of them anymore, and that's okay. I mean, my time has come and gone, and I enjoyed it when I did it, but I haven't. I think the last invitation I actually even had to one was probably in 2019. So it's been a while. And so I just kind of go about what I do every day. And of course, when the conferences are going on and Housing Wire and other companies are posting during the day different segments of what was said and the roundtables or the guest speakers, I read all of that. I follow it. But as far as physically going to them, no. I don't do that anymore, and
Well,
that's perfectly okay.
Yeah, well, Kevin, we may have to change that. Weren't you like the president of a trade group for years?
Respro.
I was,
Yeah.
I was chairman of Respro and also president of the Alaska Mortgage Bankers Association for 3 or 4 years. But I mean, everything has a shelf life, and I've always known throughout my life I have a very short shelf life with everybody. So,
Well, I'm going to jump in right here. Hold on. I'm going to jump in because I met Mr. Breeland through Respro about a good, 10, 15 years ago now, Kevin. And
I think
he
it's
would
been
give
closer to 20, but yeah, it's been a long time.
Now I'm feeling old, but Mr. Breeland would let me come in with all the real lawyers there, and if I could help them market and get the shows out there a little bit. But they were great shows. I'll say this: a gratuitous plug for Respro. Not everyone knows who Respro is out there, but it's really packs a lot of value. And I know they're having a show coming up in I think next week. This will just have been posted, but they're doing a one-stop show. And several clients of mine speaking.
I believe it's next week, and it's in Houston, I believe.
It is. And, I believe Chuck Cain is speaking there. In fact,
but
I think so.
But I can tell you that for our audience, the one thing that I got from the trade shows that you cannot get just anywhere is I have developed a very good and very close network of friends. Brian and Rick are from people that I met at trade shows. Brian Levy, Mark Sturkow, Trip Riley, Chuck Cain, all of these gentlemen are people that I met through Respro and trade shows. And so here we are. I mean, if I was thinking about this the other day, you remember, I think it was 2006 when we all flew to Chicago and met to kind of talk about what we wanted to do. And fast forward now, what is that? 18 years later?
Oh, don't say the numbers.
18 years later, the value add that came out of that trip is we're all still good friends. We never did anything that we talked about. We spent all that money to go to Chicago, and we all talked about things and ended up going off and doing our own thing. But we're still good friends to this day. And we had a great dinner, and we learned about all the different places that Marx went to when he lived in Chicago. And so we all learned more about Chicago than what we knew. But to me, there's a value in trade shows because those friends, you guys, and Mark and Trip and Brian, I value that tremendously because throughout the time that we've known each other, we rib each other in emails, or through this podcast was really born via that connection. The reality of it is that's the value in a trade show, because you never know what's going to come out of it.
Yep.
My closest friend, who we all know, Dave Ginger, I met at a Rustboro golf tournament 22 years ago. And he lives here in Austin where I live, and we're the closest of friends, and we have been for a long, long time. And the reality of it is, again, that's what the value of a trade show is. Dave was instrumental in helping the company I was with in Alaska go into a joint venture title industry situation, which they still have to this day. But the reality of it is those relationships have become personal relationships that go on past the shelf life of what you get from a trade show.
I heartily agree with you there, Kevin. I'm going to leave this out there because we need to start getting into our final approach here on this show. Two things, and I think we're going to have to visit this topic again on a future show. Two quick topics, because I wonder how much of an increase we've seen in the lobby lizards, which I have been guilty of being once or twice in the past. How many folks are getting to the site but not registering, not using the conference hotel? I'd wonder if that's gone up. And I'm going to leave this as a cliffhanger, and then we're going to come back to another one of the favorite segments of previous iterations of this show. Maybe a year or two ago, friend and client Jim Paolino of Lodestar Software Solutions wrote into Rob Crispin, who pretty much everyone in the industry reads, and posed the question, are conferences, the way we do them, are they necessary? And Jim's argument, in essence, was yes, there's a lot of good to come from conferences, but as he put it, nothing good ever happens after 10 p.m. So I'm going to leave and it provoked quite a back and forth. I'm going to leave that here because we're just about out of time. We're going to come back and address that another time. Maybe we'll bring Jim on to discuss that. So with that, we're going to wrap it up here with one more segment. I'm going to turn right back to Mr. Breeland and ask him, are you kidding me?
Okay. So, the one thing that we always try to do in this segment is make sure that we're, looking out for our billionaire friends, helping them through their hard times, and also, super large companies that they're just struggling to get by. So I'll start off with the first one. Airplane baggage fees have gone up $5 per bag. So now, the baggage fees are almost as much as the ticket. And, but if $5 is going to help make that airplane get from St. Louis to Washington, D.C. on time, I guess it's worth another $5. But I just feel bad that, United and JetBlue and Delta and American Airlines were, obviously we're just suffering out there, and we did not understand that. So now we know. They've hiked them up to $5, another $5. I think I was looking at Delta or not United yesterday, and it was $40 and $45 for 2 bags. So good grief!
I'd pay that to make sure we get off the ground in the first place these days.
And that was one way, $85 one way. So round trip, $170 for your bags. And, to go on a little golf retreat to Sheridan, Wyoming in over Labor Day, and the ticket, because you're going into a tiny airport to begin with, is outrageous, and then you throw on another $170. I'm kind of thinking Greyhound might be the answer. I'm not sure, because even though we all would like to have rail, and I'm one of those that I would love to ride the train, you can't get to Sheridan, Wyoming via train because Amtrak doesn't go anywhere near it. Closest station, Billings, Montana. So you still have a 2.5-hour drive from there.
Rick, we need a graphic for
2.5 days to get there. So,
holy cow. Very nice.
So the second part of today, are you kidding me, is real quick. Berkshire Hathaway last year made $37.5 billion, and that was a good year. when you consider it, maybe it was a little off year, but it was a good year. And they're currently sitting on $167.4 billion in cash. Now, when Warren Buffett sent out the shareholder letter, of course, he started off with a tribute to his longtime friend and partner, Charlie Munger, and Charlie passed away in November at the age of 99. So he had a great life, but he and Warren really built Berkshire Hathaway into what it is today, and so he had a wonderful tribute to that. But then, when you're talking about potential hazards, Berkshire Hathaway also has a pending litigation for $356 million. So I went ahead and did a little bit of math here to kind of see just, the punch in the face that this would be. And if they just went ahead and settled for the 356, instead of having $167.4 billion in cash, they would only have $167 billion. So I can see why that would hurt, but I think they could probably do it and move forward. So, rest in peace, Charlie. Warren, you're 92, hanging in there, keep it going, but just go ahead and throw out that 356 to those poor souls and move on. Got better things to do.
And on that note, Kevin Breeland, ladies and gentlemen, thank you, sir. Are you kidding me? At this point, I'd like to wrap things up. I want to thank our special guest from Fidelity, Chuck Cain. As always, thank you, Kevin Breeland and Mr. Rick Grant. Folks, again, we're going to be doing this hopefully about once a month. I've got a topic idea, want to be on the show. You know how to reach us. We'll have some links down there. And again, it wouldn't hurt if you added some thumbs. Our backers and investors might keep us going. Who knows? And we may even put a GoFundMe there for Berkshire, I think, too. We could try something like that.
Yeah, probably good. Maybe they could get Ohtani to throw him some money.
Maybe, yeah.
He only got $700 million, so
that's its own show, and opening day is coming. So,
on that, he hit a home run yesterday.
Oh, did he? I'm not even ready for baseball yet, truthfully. But on that note, though, guys, we are past my nap time. We're going to have to wrap it there. Gentlemen, thanks again. And until next time, thanks for joining us.
Bye.